All right, guys. It says I'm live. I just shot a video for Dr. Von Chilla's 1 year anniversary contest right before this. So, it was pretty short because he wanted a 5-minute time limit on it. And it was really odd. I kind of started getting rolling because, like I said in the other video, man, there's something about, a rainy Sunday, and it is raining outside. That kind of, sometimes gets a little nostalgic, and I'm having to low down too, so it's kind of cool to talk, get my mind off stuff about comics and stuff. And one of the books that I'm going to talk about, and one of the creators I'm going to talk about, is Eric Powell's Hillbilly. Now, if you guys have me on Facebook or Twitter, and I don't treat it like I have followers and stuff, just when something catches my eye and stuff, I've been talking about Eric Powell's Hillbilly months before it came out. Sorry, guys. And I just messed up. Anyway, so basically I've been saying, watch out for this book. I was excited about this book coming out stuff. It's going to be great. It's going to be good. Because Eric Powell to me is a very important creator when it comes to comics in general and stuff, right? For many reasons, okay? First of all, Hillbilly, if you haven't got it, I found out last night that issue 1 and 2 have sold out. This is the beginning of his Albatross line of comics. Apparently, he has left Dark Horse. I rarely follow internet news on comics and stuff, very rarely and stuff. I just knew I had to get this ordered. And number 2, I have ordered through my online comic book shop. It hasn't come in yet and stuff, but I've seen the covers for 3 and 4, and the book is just going way up. Now, I'm going to talk about Hillbilly first, then we'll talk about Eric Powell and stuff. Now, I really knew that this book was going to be awesome because, I've got the Eric Powell stuff. I'm surrounded by stacks and stacks and stacks of Eric Powell comics. For years, I would drop Eric Powell and The Goon and other things that he was doing in my videos here and there. And it took me a while to actually go ahead and do a whole video on The Goon and Eric Powell because it's one of those few books where I get a little starstruck. I get a little fanboy on it stuff, and don't get giddy, and I get kind of giddy, and I just want to do a good video on it stuff. And I've had his stuff signed, a lot of his stuff signed. I'm at Heroes Con almost every year, and that's the amazing thing about Eric Powell. If you've read any of his stuff, man, the stuff that he puts in his books, the horror aspects, the horror that he puts in there, and the humor that he puts in there, and just the Satan, Sodom, and Baby, and just all the things he touches on. When you meet the guy, he's so quiet and approachable and nice. He's one of those guys that it's a contradiction of this is coming from this guy. And he's dabbled in Conan and stuff. He's done this and he's done that. But when he came out with Hillbilly, I knew this was going to be good because I was reading his stuff. He's dabbled in Billy the Kid and the old-timey oddities and the Orm of Loch Ness. The Goon feels like a period piece. Feels like it's during the Great Depression, sort of right before or after oh my God, it's a live show off the cuff. But right before they did the abolition or whatever it was of alcohol. You get that feel for it, man. It's definitely out there. He makes an atmosphere. He creates a world. And there's this wisdom because Hillbilly takes place, of course, in the Appalachian Mountains. He's from Tennessee. I'm from Virginia. And the little things I picked up in his books over the years and stuff, he's always made little subtle statements about the, I don't know what the word is, the idea of what people have of hillbillies and stuff. And if I have to put a label on myself, I describe myself more as a mountain man. The Appalachian culture, I'm sure, is in me and influenced me and stuff, but it's not ingrained. I've always been a little bit different than the people around here, and there's other people like me and stuff, so we're not all cliches and stuff and stereotypes and stuff, which is neither here nor there, man. But with Hillbilly, he kind of comes around and he embraces a lot of the things that's automatically just thrown in there and stuff, because I knew it was going to be good because like the little subtle statements he's always made about how people are viewed that are from the Appalachian Mountains and things like that. I kind of caught it in Billy the Kid. When Billy the Kid, his first miniseries on this and stuff, it was horror and westerns and the movie Freaks from the 1930s. It's also influenced the Ramones and stuff. The movie that exploited, that's what people say, a whole bunch of real life freaks from Sideshow, pinheads, midgets, little people, whatever the word is, armless people, things like, a lot of deformities, stuff like that. But when they took on the bad guy, he wrote Billy the Kid as an uneducated cowboy, but the thing about it was he had common sense and wisdom. And when he took down the bad guy, Eric Powell, in a very subtle way, and maybe you wouldn't have picked up on it if you weren't from this area, said that he played on the arrogance of someone who thinks they're the smartest person in the room. Billy the Kid looked at him and goes, people like you don't know the difference between ignorance and stupid. The irony of thinking you're the smartest person in the room, the person who's dumb in front of you has actually outsmarted you, because he does know what you think, and he does realize you don't know the difference between ignorance and stupidity. So when I heard he's going to do Hillbilly, I've read so much Goon stuff over the year. It was really wild that I knew where this book was going to go from the get-go. It was really, really odd. It really connected to it and stuff. Now, the thing about the Appalachian Mountains that you need to know before you read the Goon is, of course, you have, if you're not from the Appalachian Mountains, or, I know people, Canada and England and Australia and stuff, watch this channel and stuff like that. Ironically, even though I grew up in this area, one of the more accurate history of the Appalachian Mountains came through a White Wolf game I was playing in the 90s. And I picked this up. It's called Rage Across the Appalachia. It gives you information to set up a campaign with the Appalachian Mountains. And it references history and real history in movies and things like that, and it even provides you a map. And it was through this map that, thanks to the internet years later, I found out was accurate. I'm not really from the Appalachian Mountains, and the people around here think we are. We're actually part of the Cumberland Mountains, which is right outside of the Appalachian Mountains. It gives you an accurate map in here, as a source book. And you guys use this for Changeling the Dreaming, if there's any White Wolf players out there. Really fascinating book. And if you go back with the Appalachian Mountains, which helps with Hillbilly with the setting that it's in, because to me it feels like it's during the turn of the century. Hillbilly feels like it's definitely I think it's definitely in the past, because I saw in the second issue he brings in the Buzzard, who's from the Goon, and in the Goon you got the history of you got the origin of the Buzzard, and he's very old. So I'm feeling like this is in like the 1890s or something like that in the Appalachian Mountains and stuff, right? But the thing you got to know about the Appalachian Mountains is that we're a very self-sufficient people, because we had to be. People who came to the mountains and settled in and stuff, you couldn't just go to town and stuff for the longest time. And you may do what you did, and that's where the culture evolved and stuff, for good or worse. And then you've got like stereotypes and things that have happened and things like that. The wandering stranger, the incest, that's out there and stuff, and it plays on the ignorance and the feuds, and things happen to where with this culture, if you live in the mountains, there ends up really being sort of a mystic feel to them sometimes. Sometimes there's a sinister, unforgiving feel to them and stuff. So the people kind of got hard and distrustful of strangers, because it was outlaws and stuff that would run here, escaped slaves and stuff. And then when it came to like the whole idea of slavery and stuff, by living the life we did and stuff, you actually get a very down-to-earth, humanistic view of life, where like I took a cultural class, when I was getting my bachelor's. You had to do it to understand other cultures, and they actually had some stuff about the Appalachian people. But there was actually like a caravan coming through that was full of slaves, and the people from the Appalachian Mountains were just sort of like slavery, just a weird concept, because there's a very fire and brimstone type of religion around here. I mean, we've got a snake church here, 2-3 snake churches that are less than 2 hours away from you and stuff, and things like that. But anyway, so, some of it's cultish, clannish, and things like that. It still exists. It's still out there. And, but, you don't see people as slaves or anything like that. You see them as a mouth to feed. So the reason slavery didn't make it up here is because, flat out, it's just a foreign concept. How can somebody be a slave? And also how, when they did look at him, it was like, well, I wouldn't want one anyway, because it's another mouth to feed, right? So for good or worse, that's kind of what makes the Appalachian Mountains different than the South, and different than the North, even that up there as it goes up north. The Appalachian Mountains goes from Georgia up to New York and stuff, right? Pennsylvania and stuff. So there's all kinds of things where you can't really shoehorn people in as hillbillies and stuff. There's still cultural things out there. Go deeper in the woods, there's still people living like it's the 50s and 60s. I've still seen outhouses and stuff. I lived somewhere for 3 months with some friends when I was young, and they still had an outhouse and stuff like that. So it's all there, and it's all out there. But Eric Powell kind of like gets that stuff out of the way. He's playing on those cliches that people have. He's playing on that brimstone and fire religion that people are used to having around here and stuff. He's into the demons. So of course, you know, Satan and Lucifer and stuff like that, you know, the clannish feel that's out there and stuff. And we come on with a mysterious origin of our hillbilly. Now, going back to Eric Powell, what he pulls from in his books is one of the things I like, and it's part of talking to him. This last Heroes Con, I got away from Eric Powell because I was starting to turn into one of those fans. He was staying at the same hotel I was, and I'd already talked to him twice at Heroes Con, but I think I was sort of giving a weird vibe. I kind of broke etiquette and talked to him when he was not at the table, at his table, and you just don't do that. But when I went back to the hotel with my buddy, I looked over and there was Eric Powell standing with somebody. He recognized me and gave me a shot, but I wouldn't look over there. So I don't know if it was a we can talk now or if it was, oh, it's that guy. I didn't want to be that fan. So I would have loved to talk to him. But we get on here and, but you know, I would love to what he got in here. Now, the thing about it is that he pulls from EC Comics. That's why he's very important to me. Eric Powell started out in the trenches of comics. He's an indie guy. And he kind of gets the importance of getting away from the big two and things. So I kind of put Eric Powell right up there with guys who did underground comics that I thought were garbage when I was a little bit now, so they're important, like Robert Crumb. You know, doing things their way, becoming famous their way. And Dave Sim and Cerebus. Dave Sim's a controversial character, I know, for many reasons and stuff, but every now and then when I read an issue of Cerebus, when he gets into those slice of life moments and stuff, I have to like do my eye, you know, kind of shake my head and set the book down for me, because like in this one, Cerebus 53, you know, I turned around, he had 2-3 moments in here that I swear it went down exactly like it did, you know, with Cerebus and the Duchess here, I think was her name. Sitting on a windowsill. You can kind of see the window. It's a wraparound cover, I think. Sitting on the windowsill, having a small little talk about lost loves while looking out the window at the night sky and stuff. And at the same time, the Duchess is wanting Cerebus, and Cerebus is oblivious to it because, you know, he's talking about Jocka and lost loves. And I was just like, oh my God, I've done this, you know, and things like that. I mean, you know, so indie books were important for that reason. I'll touch on more of that in a minute, man. We might be here for a while. I really need to see if we have comments, so I might take a second here and pull it up. But anyway, Hillbilly is a book I highly recommend. It's grounded. It's not an event comic. You know, it goes through and he tells the story, and he pulls from old horror. In the early 70s, if you go look at House of Secrets from DC and House of Mystery and stuff, you usually had kids on the cover with some terrifying arm coming out of a haunted house, or some danger that the kids are in. One of those ambush covers is what you call them, going back to Joe Kubert and Nick Hardy and stuff, right? And Neil Adams said the reason he put kids on the comics was to get around the comic book code and still have this feeling of terror and stuff. You go all the way back to EC Comics, Wally Wood, Jack Davis, and all those guys. Eric Powell did tell me these guys from EC Comics were a lot of his influences. And when you go back before pre-comic book code comics and stuff, EC Comics was the place to be in the 50s, man. It influenced movies, and George Romero and Stephen King, and you got Creepshow, movies out of Tales of the Dark Side, you know, Tales from the Crypt that everybody loves from, you know, HBO in the 90s and stuff like that. This has always been influential. And this guy, being in the trenches, is a student of comics, a student of that. He's pulled from that in Kirby and some other stuff like that. And he's pulled out his own little niche where the characters are humanized, yet they could just as easily be the monsters that they fight. And he's always waving the flag for indie books and stuff. And with the decline of what I consider the decline of Marvel and the shrinking shrinking of the market share in its own. I think, you know, it's time to go back to some of these indie books. A lot of people are ahead of the game on this than I am stuff, but indie books in the 80s and stuff, like, you know, the late 70s and 80s, Cerebus, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Love and Rockets, all these books I sort of kind of either didn't have access to or dodged, you know, have kind of come to fruition with Eric Powell and what he's doing. He's really into the importance of the art. The man is an artist. He does whitewash. He pulls from 50s movies. They're original. It's a fresh read when you get in there, man. You're reading something new and progressive on its own, but it's pulling from, you know, the purity of the comics as an art form, right, without taking itself too serious at the same time. I mean, the guy is a student of the comics, and it shows, okay? And that's very important because it's going to take things like that. People remembering the rules of comic books, people remembering things like, you know, this is sort of entertaining, but and he subtly says something and it laughs at itself. He has satire, pokes fun at things. All from this little quiet guy who will sit there and shake your hand and just be very soft spoken. And he's into roller derby and, you know, roller derby and what's the word? Not stripping, but I hate doing live shows sometimes when I go blank, you know. But anyway, you get the feathers and the pasties, and there's the stuff like that. Ooh, I got a message. So with Hillbilly, you come in there and it pulls from things that are in the mountains, man. You find out he's got sort of, we'll say, a demon bear right now. That's his friend that pops up at the end. He deals with witches. He deals with the incest, that what could be the mystery of the mountains and stuff. He deals with weapons that actually came out of Lucifer's kitchen in hell that have been touched by him. I mean, I laugh because it had Satan's ladle in there for a minute. His cleaver came from Satan's kitchen. He fights witches that try to eat kids, you know, harkening back to like Hansel and Gretel and stuff like that. And the last time I've actually seen anybody really touch on the Hillbilly and the horror that can be from the Appalachian Mountains was The Crooked Man by Mike Mignola in Hellboy, which supposedly was caused by them taking Interstate 77 and stopping in a place called Grayson County and the people freaking them out and stuff, right? But there's things around here called Melungeons, supposedly. It's a race that kind of developed here from all sorts of outlaws, and you know, the mythology has grown and stuff. But it starts with escaped slaves and outlaws, and all kinds of other people coming up there and hiding in the mountains and, you know, turning into something. And there's a little thing about Melungeon witches and stuff like that. And there's a Melungeon society around here. There's things in these mountains you don't see anywhere else. But anyway, he pulls from all that. But yet it's not a heavy read. He pulls from these stories. It's everything that's around here and stuff, man. The Hillbilly started out as a kid with no eyes. And this witch that came up, and I've heard this witch's name before, I can't think of it, was wanting to use the kid to take out, I think, another witch or something. So she used her magic and her evil. She hands him Lucifer as a kid. She hands this kid who's born down to the eyes, you know, Lucifer's cleaver from his kitchen and stuff. And then she takes him down and she takes a knife. She cuts slits for eyes and they're black. And he starts crying because he finds out, I'm not going to ruin the book. He finds out the price of what he's done. And black tears came out of him and stained his face. And they'll never go away. Right off the bat, it's just this terrible, you know, this terrible stuff. And then we get into him having a grizzly bear friend, sort of like a mascot as a friend. That's about the only thing I may have ruined in the book. And it's all there. So culturally for me, I think it's kind of cool because it's definitely got the feel around here that if you go too deep in the woods and the mountains, you're going to get. And it's got the sinister, he could have just been as much as a monster. He's actually had to tone down some of his humanity. He actually is kind of fueled by a little bit of hate and stuff, but he still helps people and protects them. And it's that drive that keeps him going for the big plot point of the price of him getting sight in that cleaver and trying to be used by the witches and stuff like that. And these are witches that eat kids. You know, he saves children, and that goes back to the Neil Adams stuff. Give me a second, guys. I want to see if I can pull something up, see if I have any comments. And I'll talk about Eric Powell a little bit more here, man. Really wished I had a second person on here who could have helped me keep track of all this. So anyway, when it comes to the importance of Eric Powell in the indie market and stuff like that, I really feel like that's what's going to fuel the comics. I think now is a really good time to kind of step away from Marvel a little bit, and DC with the rebirth is bringing in a lot of fans that are doing a lot of good work. But the indie books, I think, are going to be important, because the importance of indie is that if you go back, a lot of people who ended up rejuvenating comics with the big two, Marvel and DC, came from the indie market. All right, guys, let me see what I can get done here. See who's out here and who's watching. I need to take a breather anyway. Excuse me while I get my coffee. There's a little pressure when you're doing a live show. You feel like you got to keep everybody entertained every now and then, and you kind of feel like you need to fill every space with words, you know. So this may not be going to. I don't think it's going to work. Come on. Interesting. I do believe it froze up on me. Let's try it this way. I'm not going to spend all day on this. All right, guys, I'm going to give this about 30 more seconds. I'm going to move on. Get my train of thought going. Oh, I appreciate the people hanging in there and watching this. So slow today on a rainy Sunday. Nice. People want to jump off. I don't hurry. Lame. All that work and it's not even showing on broadcasting. All right, guys, if you guys are leaving comments and stuff, I do apologize. I don't know. Maybe if you got questions, you can hop on Twitter and give me an alert or something, because this is not going to do it. And we're going to get off there. And I am back on the screen here. Now, like I said, if I don't know if I messed up anything going on there with the live chat and stuff like that, but we'll shoot it this way, man. If you got anything to say, throw it on Twitter. I'm going to go ahead and get on my Twitter. We'll try it that way. So anyway, Hillbilly is a book that sold out. Wish You Wanted to have sold out. I got told that last night. Pretty reliable source. So that kind of says a lot about with DC Rebirth going on and the movies in the middle of the summer happening and the market share shrinking. The fact that a book that was under the radar, unless you were an Eric Powell fan, following him online, listening to people who were Eric Powell fans and stuff, that's a pretty important book. And the thing about Eric Powell's books and indie books, now this is completely my speculation. We were out of the realm of me talking to Eric Powell. We were out of the realm of me reading any interviews with Eric Powell or anything like that. But what I pick up on as a fan is that he will humanize characters. He will, he comes in there and they'll have like some kind of heartbreak that makes them human. That you sympathize with the character. They'll have some kind of, they'll have the odds stacked against them, like in Big Man Plans, this little guy whose dad hated him, and ends up just raising hell for 4 issues and stuff, man, from the way he was raised and the way people treated him and everything like that. That's why he fits in when you get characters like Conan and stuff. Like, he'll come in there and there's some savagery and some brutality and stuff. Yet he can turn around on a heartbeat and do humor, man. Like, he came around and he did Big Trouble in Little China. Met with John Carpenter and picked up right where the movie left off. And I think this just ended after 25 issues. And I don't think Eric Powell stayed on the whole 25 issues because Eric Powell does have a bit of a following. And then these smaller books and stuff, of course, they don't have that big of a print run. So, unless you order them online or you got a pull or a comic book shop was willing to take a chance, you may not run across a lot of his stuff. But his stuff always moves forward, even though it could be a standalone issue and he can just turn around and throw some horror in there with a little bit of humor all of a sudden. You always get the feeling his books were going somewhere, and that's how it was with the Goon. You kind of kept on because you felt like something was going to happen. There'd be a little snippet here of a little mystery of like, how did the Goon get his face smashed in? Why is the Goon heartbroken and things like that? It's eventually coming, but he doesn't rush to get there, and then the payoff is always there. That's why I look forward to Hillbilly. I've already got the feeling that book, after just reading this first issue, that it's going somewhere. You know, we're just getting some exposition now. We're getting to know the character and stuff. And if you go up and you pre-order these, or you look at what's coming up, I've seen all the covers going up to issue 4, and they're already getting better and better. Issue 4, I posted on my Facebook, and a lot of people went nuts about it, man, because it's something about like the Devil's Fiddle or something like that. He gives these old kind of old-fashioned sort of grindhouse titles to him, old pulp novels. I mean, look at some of the stuff that he comes up with for his trades. My Murderous Childhood, Rough Stuff, Nothing But Misery, and they go on from there. The Goon Noir, he puts in a little noir in there every now and then too. Then you have characters you just fall in love with and you have no idea. And then he did kind of do a promotional thing where he lied about somebody, but you have like Satan's Sodomy Baby, that he actually like had a warning. And on this side of the cover of this, he signed it for me and drew a little goon in there for me. But you have things like Satan's Sodomy Baby, where, you know, that's kind of where he makes some, you know, he'll sit there and he'll just kind of embrace some things that he knows are going to piss people off that aren't really PC, and they shouldn't be, man. That's the love of the indie market. Now, you go back to the indie market when I was a kid, and this is another thing where I don't know if this was intentional by Eric Powell and stuff, but he turns around, and when you read indie books, like in my day when you were a kid, you know, you had your superheroes. Superheroes were ruling the world, okay? If you go back to the history of comics, man, you know, you had Westerns there for the longest time, ruling the world, crime comics after World War II. There's always been a genre, but something about the superheroes really just kind of took over and got a stranglehold and never went away. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what I grew up in and stuff. And the horror comics, you know, there's always different genres. But then you had these indie books come out, and the indie books they had a feel all of their own in the 80s, because you didn't know what the word is, but you read this, and there's a little bit of you that got a little uncomfortable. There's a little bit of you that made you feel like you shouldn't have been reading this, or the violence was just a little bit too real, or, you know, you're reading this book about superheroes or some odd thing that's coming out, and they were called mature tones. It was maturity in it. You know, you had sex in there and things like that were getting kind of handled, and it gave it, indie books had a tone all their own. One of the things that hooked me on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which caused a great big huge black and white boom, was of indie books and stuff, was right in that first issue, was where one of the turtles, I want to say it was Michelangelo. Anyway, I don't know. But anyways, that he has a ninja, and a ninja got a hit on him, and they're fighting on rooftops and stuff, and they sit there and they see the turtle bleed. He goes, "Yes, I bleed, and so can you." And he chops his damn head off, is what he does. They were pulling from Kirby and Frank Miller and things like that with these ninjas. And that was the difference with the indie books, and why they kind of stood out a little bit. All of a sudden, you'd have like this slice of life where it was a little bit too real, or you had these cute little characters that were all of a sudden being a little bloodthirsty. And that was a big deal back then. You were reading Batman and watching the Saturday morning cartoons and things like that. So, and that's what happens with Goon. Goon will just rip your heart out if you don't watch, out of the blue, or it'll have you laughing, or he'll just throw out this amazing concept that you're just sort of like, do more with it. And he just goes on with the story, and it keeps it about the Goon and Frankie and his best friend. Let me see what we got here. Okay. Guys, let's see what's on Twitter here. I really wish I could get to the chat. It makes me lose my train of thought, and I don't want to lose anybody here. So anyway, the internet is so slow today. Little circles. How funny. Any other time would be working perfectly here. So take a chance on the indie books of and try to grab some Hillbilly. Try to go back and grab some Goon. Kind of give this guy support who kind of waves the flag for indie books, and you actually get the bang for your buck. You get a satisfying read on it. You know, supporting these indie guys and stuff like that is, I think, where the real creativity is coming from. Matt Comic Order and I were on the phone the other night. Comic Order 410 has his own channel and stuff, and I'm going to use his story. It's his story, so he doesn't mind. But he's telling me when he was at a convention, and there was a guy named Steve Sakai who does Usagi Yojimbo, and Neil Adams. Neil Adams has a bit of a reputation of being kind of a gruff kind of guy. You just never know what you're going to get with him, and a lot of people have a bad experience with him. So Neil Adams was kind of picking on a few people like Amanda Connor and kind of ribbing some people and things like that. But then you get to Steve Sakai. Steve Sakai has the line. Steve Sakai is just a very, very nice man with a great reputation. And I kind of follow him on Facebook, and he comes out as a very nice person. Then you have Neil Adams here, who's kind of a legend. And he did this thing in the 70s where he was wanting creators' rights and people being treated better and stuff. Standing there, he's like, he's not going to interrupt Steve Sakai after ribbing all these other creators. And he sits there and he waits, and he walks up and he shakes Steve Sakai's hand. He's very respectful, gives him a hug. And somebody, maybe it was Matt or a comic book reporter or something like that, asked him like, I see you're very respectful of Steve Sakai. And he looked at him and he's like, Steve Sakai deserves respect because for 30 years, he is can you name another artist or a guy who has done their own book and never went to the big two? Also with Usagi Yojimbo, he's kept the integrity of the character, because apparently there's been a lot of behind the movie news going back to the 90s of people fighting for that property of Usagi Yojimbo. And he's never let it go to where, unless he was happy with where he was comfortable saying that the integrity of this character was going to be kept. So he's got the kind of career respect and freedom that all these other people have always wanted to kind of strive to. And that's where I think Eric Powell is going. I think Eric Powell is going to be this person. He's been in the trenches since at least the late 90s. He's left Dark Horse, it looks like, started Albatross Comics. I've already seen another book he's going to come out with. And I think everybody's just kind of waiting for him to bring out the goon with it and stuff. And I think Eric Powell is, got enough popularity and common sense, and he's just got everything going for him. He's nice to his fans when you meet him. He seems to have a vision, and he seems to have a drive about indie comics. I don't feel like it's just to make money. I'm sure he wants to make a living, keep making a living at it and keep being able to put out these books and stuff, man. And it just shines through in his works and his book. And the Twitter is not going to work, man. And I've got some people who may be asking questions. So anyway, I'm going to kind of leave it at there. I was going to talk more about this, but I think I've said everything I want to say, man. But, once again, pick up some older Eric Powell stuff, man. Jump on there and get you, if you can find one, pick up Hillbilly. This the book's going to get better and better, just better and better. And, take a chance. All right. Thanks for everybody that stuck through this live show. Got a little off track there. It's all right. I was doing this off the cuff. So catch you guys later, and keep reading some comics.